that you might as well put a big sign on the White Cliffs of Dover saying everyone welcome, because we'd stopped deporting people who'd arrived in our country illegally. And it's quite a thought that in the last year of the Labour government, leading up to 2010, 45,000 people who came to Britain illegally had been deported. But we'd given up on that. So I said that I thought, unless something dramatic was done, that there would be an invasion. Now, of course, for using that word, I was called all the names under the sun. But 3,800 votes later, 125,000 people later, you can use whatever word you want. I happen to think that invasion, frankly, was pretty appropriate. So I've campaigned hard on this issue throughout this 4-year period, and I'm going to say to you, frankly, I was ahead of the curve on this. I was right. And that's kind of what I've done in my career. I'm an issues campaigner above all. So nobody was talking about it when I started, but you're all talking about it now. And it's worth bearing in mind that 86% of those that come are male, and nearly all of them under the age of 40, most under the age of 30. Unsurprisingly, it's led to a very big national debate. People see the unfairness of it. They say, how can it be that we're on social housing waiting lists for a year, perhaps 2 years, when these people that come illegally are put straight into 4-star hotels, or, if not that, private accommodation? How can it be that those that come have access to dental care when we can't get an NHS dentist? And I think the fact that the hotels alone are costing over £7 million a day makes people pretty upset. Those that have come into the country legally aren't very happy about it either, because they've gone through costs, time and hoops to be in the country the right way. But it's the other element of this that I want to focus on today. Frankly, I think this is very dangerous. You only have to look at what's happened in Sweden, in cities like Malmö, to see that a large influx of young males coming from an entirely different culture, and certainly coming from a culture in which women are not even regarded as second-class citizens, has had, frankly, disastrous social effects. But since the events of October the 7th and what has happened in Gaza and increased radicalisation in the Middle East, this is even more of a problem. You see, these young men that come, and I've actually filmed this, I've filmed on the 12-mile median line, people throwing their iPhones into the sea, throwing their passports into the sea, doing everything they can so that we can't track and identify them. Although it's okay, because they get an iPhone, a new one, within 24 hours of arrival. But I think this is a national security issue. Now, if you think I'm being over the top, let's ever think about our friend Donald Tusk, who I did battle with in the European Parliament many times, very much an EU lovey, now, of course, the Prime Minister of Poland. He has talked about the wave of, and I'm using his words, not mine, aggressive young males that are coming into Poland, having crossed the Mediterranean, and he has said that this is now a matter of national security for Poland. Well, I put it to you that if it's a matter of national security in Poland, I think what we ought to be doing with this situation here is declaring a national security emergency. And this is an emergency. I talked over the course of the weekend to Trevor Phillips about the small but worryingly growing number of young men, predominantly young men, in this country, adopting radical views that aren't just un-British, but views that frankly are extremely anti-British. We saw the recent local elections, candidates being elected in inner city districts, in Leeds, in Burnley and elsewhere. We saw the aggression. And you might have noticed that Angela Rayner yesterday was campaigning in her constituency, begging a group of Muslim leaders to please vote Labour. You'll have noticed not a single woman in the room. So we're moving into an age in our inner cities and towns, I'm afraid, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded. I have to say that the Rwanda policy is something that was plucked out of the air by a desperate Conservative government, launched just down the coast at Lyd Airport 2 years and 1 month ago. And Rishi Sunak, of course, has inherited that from Boris Johnson and keeps making promises that planes will go to Rwanda. I am absolutely convinced that the overriding reason for calling a snap early general election is because he knows those planes in July, as he promised, would not be going to Rwanda. They weren't going to go. Rishi can't stop the boats. And he can't stop the boats for the very same reason that the first aeroplane that was on the tarmac and ready to go was stopped, if you remember, by a judgment from a single so-called judge. I say so-called because most of the judges in the European Court of Human Rights haven't actually been legally trained. They're jurists, which is a very odd European concept, at least to us. And he knows that it won't happen. He knows that despite everything that they put in the legislation which disapplies Articles 2 and 3 of the Human Rights Act 1998, he knows that an international treaty goes over, above and beyond that. And planes not going to Rwanda would see the failure of what he believes to be his flagship policy. And that's where the other R comes in. That's where the reform vote, he feared, would have gone a lot higher. So I genuinely believe that's the reason why we've got this early general election. The Conservative policy on Rwanda does not work. We are, I'm afraid, in a situation where our leaders do not have courage to do different. As for the Labour policy, well, frankly, it is a joke. They haven't got a policy. They say get tough on the criminal gangs. We've been saying for decades in this country we would get tough on the criminal drugs gangs. But has that made any difference to the supply of illegal substances? Far from it. In fact, they're being consumed today by more people and in greater quantities than ever before. Those gangs over there on the other side, and we're talking about some very ruthless people, some very dangerous people, those gangs on the other side can make 2 to 3 million euros a week during the months of June, July, August, September, if we get a clear spell of
So this is Nigel Farage you're listening to. Of course, he's Honorary President of Reform UK, speaking in Dover. Of course, he's not running. And we're going to see Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, she's speaking too. So they're all out and about today. But we're going to stick with Nigel Farage, of course.
Looks like they've got the same branding, haven't they?
Yeah, who isn't, of course, Farage running for office at all. He's decided not to do that. Didn't he, in a statement, talk about how important it was that he engaged with America?
Yeah. Right, we're going to go back to Farage and we will go and hear what Rachel Reeves has to say in just a moment.
Whether you agree with it or not, it was about restoring sovereignty. It was about being in control. And there is no doubt that the issue that pushed the turnout up in 2016 to numbers that nobody anticipated was the issue of immigration. Mostly, actually, legal immigration, but we'll talk much more about that later on this week. To Brexit voters, what is happening in the English Channel is a serious affront. And they see, frankly, us allowing it to continue as being a betrayal of what they voted for in the referendum.